Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. Today's story is written by Tobias Malm. If you like this story, please go check out his book, The Cave to Another World, link in the description below. And also a huge shout out to Mr. Darkness for his collaboration in today's story. Link to his channel also down below. On December 2nd, 1987, the Soviet Deep Space Network received a transmission from outer space. It was the first picked up by the Galenki RT-70 radio telescope and soon confirmed by the other telescopes within the system. The signal, which was repeated every day for about 2 weeks, came from KIC 8462852, today more famously known as the Tabby Star. It is an F-type main sequence star located in the constellation Cygnus, approximately 1,470 light-years from Earth. Unusual light fluctuations on the star, including up to 22% dimming of brightness, were discovered by citizen scientists as part of the Planetary Hunt project. These observations puzzled the scientific community, which is yet to be explained what kind of natural phenomenon could cause such a massive dip in the brightness in a star. My team, however, wasn't as surprised. Given the transmissions and the nature of its content, we felt confident that the dimming of Tabby Star must have been the result of some kind of artificial megastructure, such as a Dyson swarm. The transmission contained 2 datasets. The first set was a mathematical blueprint of a large rectangular structure resembling a doorframe, and the second one was a date, communicated to us with the help of a number of illustrations of our solar system where the planetary orbits around the sun were used to indicate the passage of time. It only took us a week to figure out which date it indicated, November 18, 2019. But we weren't able to figure out what would actually happen on that date. Although, as you can probably guess by now, we know. We spent decades trying to build the structure and almost lost our funding several times, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But slowly and surely, we kept trying and trying and trying. And then, around the same time Tabby Star began appearing in the media, we finally finished it. It looked sublime. A giant gateway standing at the center of our Siberian facility in the middle of nowhere. It didn't have any visible features except a hole at the top, but it consisted of billions of intricate circuits, cooled down to around -237 degrees, and it was powered by a small nuclear reactor. Even though the entire facility felt as cold as Antarctica, not just because of the dilution refrigeration, but also the harsh weather outside, I was still sweating when we were about to turn the power on for the first time. But nothing happened. No matter what we tried, we couldn't get it to do anything. And for years, all we could do was monitor it. It was disappointing, especially after all the hard work we had put into it. Our last hope was the mysterious date. And after it had come to pass, everything changed. On Monday, November 19th, 2019 at 23:54 KRAT, an object entered Earth's atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. To unsuspecting astronomers around the globe, it looked identical to a small meteor. We knew better though, and a Leda-class submarine was deployed with me on board together with the rest of the crew. The object came down on Disappointing Island, an uninhabited island in the Yucatan Islands archipelago. It felt surreal stepping ashore, not knowing what kind of alien artifact we would find there. It was during the hour of fading twilight when we arrived, and the birds swarming the island, as if in apprehension, aroused an eerie sensation crawling up my spine. We found the object inside of a crater. It was spherical, about as large as a pool ball, and its surface looked like the surface of the giant structure we had built in Siberia. Unlike our construction, however, this dark sphere was active. It took some time for us to understand that, though, since its activity was only audible. "Quiet," I said to the soldiers that had stepped ashore with me. "Listen." None of us moved a muscle while we stood around the crater. There was an echo of a slow, dragging footsteps coming from the sphere. It sounded like a recording, more as if we heard something actually happening in front of us, if that makes sense. The footsteps stopped for a minute and then continued until they faded out completely. After that, at least as far as we could hear, beneath the agitated birds and the windy island, the sphere went silent. One brave soldier volunteered to touch the sphere, making sure it was safe, and after that we moved it to the submarine. It wasn't as heavy as it looked, just as if it was hollow. During our entire voyage back to Russia, I sat next to the sphere, listening carefully. It was mostly silent, but now and then I could hear the echoes of something that reminded me of metal scraping against metal, although I couldn't explain what it was that I heard, or by which means I could hear it. It still felt ominous and foreboding. Back at the freezing facility, we soon discovered that the sphere would fit perfectly inside the hole on top of the structure, and thus that it was what was missing all these years, the last piece to our puzzle.
It has traveled through space for more than 1,000 years.
My colleague and dear friend Dmitri told us, although we all already knew it.
Alexander,
He said and looked up to me from his wheelchair.
You really heard footsteps?
I nodded. Amazing, Sonia, our chief engineer, said. Alien footsteps from 1,000 years. I cleared my throat, interrupting her. I'm not so sure that these sounds are recorded, I said and looked at my colleagues' uncertain eyes. They have no repetition so far. Every sound we've heard has been interrupted and unique, and it's been several hours.
What are you trying to say?
Dmitri asked, anticipating an answer beyond his wildest imaginations.
Are you suggesting?
It's just a thought, a hypothesis at best, but I think we have to consider the sounds have something to do with the obvious function of this black orb. The structure is clearly meant to be a doorway, and the spherical component, as you could all probably think as well, is most likely what will open that doorway, what will connect our world to theirs. You mean this doorway already connects to? Sonia began without finishing. I bit my frozen lip nervously, trying to collect my thoughts. If I would have to guess, I would say that it entangles with an identical object on the far side on a quantum level, somehow allowing us to hear what is happening 1,000 light years away in real time. And although it's beyond our knowledge how, I do believe that it is through this entanglement that the sphere will allow us to go there, perhaps in an instant. If we were to place it inside the hole on top of the structure, we all felt the pressure of fate, perhaps the fate of mankind on our shoulders.
If this is true,
Dmitri whispered,
it means that it goes both ways.
Boshe moi, Sonia said with a trembling voice. They can hear us. We proceeded to set up a soundproof chamber in which we put the sphere together with microphones so that we could observe its activities without being able for it to observe us. While we studied it, trying to find out as many clues as possible about exactly what was on the other side, we began talking about what to do next. At this point, the higher-ups in the Russian space forces, and even in the government, had suddenly become extremely interested in our little underfunded team of engineers and researchers. They sent in analysts, diplomats, and generals who all wanted their say in the matter of how to proceed. I will not dwell on the politics of it all, but it quickly became a mess, and its first victim was unsurprisingly the scientific method. My team wanted to study the sphere for maybe 2 years before putting it inside the structure, not only to learn as much as possible, but also to be safe. But the generals only really cared about their careers and didn't want us to sit on this longer than just a few months. And in the end, even though we had still only heard strange metallic scrapings coming from the sphere, they decided on a very simplistic plan, naming to put the sphere in place and send in a probe, and if it looked safe, to send a team through what we assumed to be a gateway. They didn't listen to our warnings about rushing things, but they did at least take the potential threat seriously enough to prepare for it in the way that we asked for. Since we knew next to nothing about the beings who sent us the sphere, except that they were thousands of times more advanced than us, we had no choice but to prepare for the worst with the strongest defenses known to man, a thermonuclear missile. Seeing PC-28 Kepmal being rolled into the facility prior to opening the gateway was a menacing sight to behold. If something hostile were to enter from the other side, the bomb would be detonated and obliterate everything in the area. In the middle of June this year, a crane lifted the sphere up to the top of the structure. I stood next to Dimitri and the rest of my team down on the floor, alarmingly close to the armed missile. I looked at the young soldiers next to it, who had been given the assignment to trigger it in the worst-case scenario. I had asked myself, were they really prepared for death at their tender age? If so, how brave. If not, how foolish. The structure was surrounded by military guards with dogs while the general stood on an impromptu observation deck a few hundred meters away. The probe we intended to send in was a rover sent to us from Roscomos. A female voice spoke through the public address system and echoed through the cold facility. There might have been a way for us to avoid noise around the sphere, but since we had to be ordered to go through with the mission so quickly, we hadn't had the time. This meant that everything said on our side, especially the instructions being delivered through the speakers, could be heard on the other side. It was reckless, to say the least. As suspected, the sphere fit perfectly into the hole on the top of the structure. We didn't know what to expect, but we all expected something. A silence fell upon all of us. I didn't even dare to breathe. But nothing happened. For a moment, we thought that there was something wrong, and then one of the dogs began barking like a wild animal. It made the hair on my neck stand on end, because it meant that something bad had happened. We just couldn't sense it. One of the dogs got free, somehow, and ran up to the gateway. The soldier in charge of it ran after her, yelling for it to stay put, but it wouldn't listen. And then, when it ran through the gateway, it just vanished. A collective gasp could be heard throughout the facility, and then a concerned murmur. The gateway was, without a doubt, open.
Did that dog just travel over 1,000 light years?
Dimitri asked. No one said anything for a couple of minutes, fruitlessly trying to hear the dog through the sphere. And then one of the generals spoke with authority from the speaker in the ceiling. "Send in the probe." The rover vanished just like the dog. We all looked at the screen on the wall, which was connected to the rover through a cable that seemed to hang in the air by itself, in suspenseful anticipation. Nothing. There was a crash coming from the sphere, and then everything went silent again. I gulped out of anticipation and anxiety. We debated what might have happened, but of course there was no way for us to know. It was suggested that maybe the rover had fallen over by accident, and for no other reason than conversation that was taken as a fact. Next, we put the camera on a metal bar and inserted it into the portal, and after having been retrieved 15 minutes later, we finally got our first glimpse of what was it like on the other side. The recording was heavily distorted and didn't reveal much, just as if the camera had been subject to some sort of radiation, although none of it was detected. But it was clear that there was a large, open space on the other side. The ground was too flat to be natural, and there were shadows in the distance indicating structures. Nothing of what we saw offered any explanation as to what happened to the rover, and the dog nowhere to be seen. I had to argue for Dimitri to be on the team that was eventually decided to be sent through the gateway. Since he was in a wheelchair, the general in charge thought he was just going to be a liability for the rest of the team. But I convinced him that his expertise in exobiology was absolutely necessary for the trip. That wasn't entirely true. After the accident with the Soyuz TM-5 spacecraft that put Dimitri in a wheelchair, he had spent almost all his life working on our top secret project. I would be damned if he, my best friend, wasn't allowed to see the fruits of his own labor, and thus I proudly helped him inside the spacesuit. "Now, you'll get to be the cosmonaut you were always meant to be," I said with a smile on my otherwise weather-beaten face. "We'll make history again, just like we used to back in the day."
For the motherland, eh?
He said and laughed himself into a coughing fit.
I think I need a drink.
"After this, we will have deserved it," I said. Aside from myself and my small team of scientists, a group of highly trained commandos, frogmen, were assigned to assist us. Their presence didn't make me feel any safer. Whatever waited for us on the other side, if they greeted us with hostility, we wouldn't stand a chance. We were nothing more than pesky ants walking in through the front door of a house beyond our comprehension, standing in front of a large gateway. All suited up enhanced that sensation considerably. While saluting the generals on the observation deck, a female choir sang the national anthem. "All this splendor," I whispered to Dmitri and patted his shoulder, "only to cover up how insignificantly small we are beneath the ancient secrets we are about to uncover." The commander next to me had to struggle in his spacesuit to make the sign of the cross. I nodded to him and smiled in an attempt to inspire some confidence. He didn't need to know that his gun would be useless. All I could hear in my helmet was my own rapid breathing, telling me just how scared I really was, and the radio chatter. "Proceed forward." It was the general. He cleared his throat and then continued with a softer voice. "Make Russia and the whole of mankind proud." I took a deep breath. Dmitri grabbed the wheels of his chair and pushed his way towards the gateway. I hesitated for a second and looked at the people behind me. The fact that they would be over 1,000 light years away from me in just a few moments was almost impossible to wrap my mind around. "Alexander," Sonia said, "it's time." I helped her carry a metal crate with equipment. It made me feel somewhat safer somehow to walk next to her. Even though the spacesuit protected against the cold, I could still feel the extreme temperatures coming from the frozen gateway. The gold visor attached to my helmet fogged from my icy breath. We all stopped right in front of the invisible threshold. That minute, it felt like hours. All I could see behind the gateway was the wall of the other end of the facility. There was no visual cues at all, not even the slightest vibration of air. It made what was about to happen even harder to believe. Nobody said anything. The commandos just made sure that their guns were ready to fire. I looked at Sonia, but I couldn't see her face behind the visor.
"Well then,"
Dmitri finally said.
"Godspeed, comrades."
That became the unofficial go, and we stepped over the threshold. The transition was seamless. A crack in the radio was the only indication that something had happened, cutting off our contact with Earth. For some reason, the radio signals couldn't penetrate the gateway. A wondrous sight greeted us. The star filtered through a partly cracked, orange-tinted dome that covered the entire sky, shone down on a dark and silent cityscape filled with skyscrapers taller than anything we could ever build on Earth. They were all black silhouettes against the rising sun. Outside the dome, tons of twisted metal and enormous chunks of broken structures floated through space. Two things became immediately clear to us after seeing this. One, that we were standing on a space platform large enough to allow its own gravity, indeed a part of an attempted Dyson swarm, and that at some point between when the message was sent to Earth and now, this entire civilization was entirely abandoned or destroyed. After an enormous platform came into view, solemnly rising at the horizon like a black flower and casting its giant hexagonal shadow on top of us, it was ripped apart in the middle by unimaginable ancient forces, letting through a sunbeam that illuminated the landscape in front of us. Large steps climbed down from the gateway, and the rover we had sent through laid crashed against the ground beneath them. The gateway stood at the edge of a large oval square that was surrounded by identical gateways, indicating that the people who built this civilization had sent out many messages to the stars and potentially waited for answers. The dog came running towards us from the middle of the square, proving that the platform was pressurized and filled with oxygen. Taking off our helmets was out of the question though, since we still didn't know what other gases or even possible pathogens might have lingered in this atmosphere. We descended the stairs. Sonia and I helped Dmitri and investigated the rover. It had clearly fallen down the stairs, just as we had suspected, but there was also a small set of holes in the side that we just couldn't explain. The dog wagged its tail when it reached us. One of the commanders bent down and patted it on the head. He looked at her tag. "Good girl," he said and laughed. "Her name is Alionia, a true hero."
"I have a bad feeling about this place. I mean, What happened here?
Dmitri said. All of these gateways, Sonia said, just waiting to be connected to some faraway world. Look, I said and pointed at one of the gateways on the other end of the square. That one is broken, almost as if it was blown up. Although my gut feeling and an uneasy inkling of apprehension told me to stay away from the forsaken place and to return to Earth, my scientific curiosity kept me going. The gateway was indeed in ruins, and by the look of it, it was the result of an explosion. I looked back at our own gateway, anonymous among the rest of them. If anything was to happen to it, I thought, we would be stranded further away from home than anyone in history of mankind.
Alexander!
I heard Dimitri's voice in my helmet. It was a few hundred meters away from me.
Look at these.
There was an enormous, seemingly fossilized bone scattered across the ground. Sonia helped us collect some of the smaller pieces while the commandos patrolled the area. Hundreds of small holes covered the brittle fossils, just as if they had been eaten by worms at some point. This looks to be part of a skull, I said and pointed to a piece as large as a boulder. How fascinating. How astonishingly fascinating.
Its size might explain why the gateways are so large.
Dmitri added.
They might have used their own size as a point of reference.
I have a theory, Sonia said. All of these gateways, they must have been built them to reach some potential civilized worlds. But this gateway, this particular gateway, you don't think that it collapsed over time, from natural causes? I asked. Maybe they invited something unfriendly, she said.
Something more powerful than the beings who built all this?
Dmitri asked. I took a deep, unsteady breath. If so, the question is...
What happened to the ones who destroyed them?
Dmitri continued, sending shivers down my spine. I think maybe we should return and... Sonia was interrupted by the commandos who were yelling at us to get behind them. Again, as if they didn't know that this is the place where we were nothing more than primitive troglodytes. From one of the broad, desolate streets leading to the square, a figure as tall as a building appeared. It limped towards us, slowly stepping into the light. Just by seeing how slowly it moved, I understand that it was the source of the footsteps that I had heard coming from the sphere on Disappointing Island. It had a skinny, gray body filled with bleeding holes. Its huge head resembled the fossil that we had found on the ground, with 10 or more of the small eyes covering its entire face. No mouth or nose, just unblinking eyes. It moved its arms in such a way that it looked like it wanted to shoo us away, but it was impossible to say if there were any aggressiveness behind it.
Mother of God, this isn't right. Please, Alexander, take me back,
Dmitri said. The dog barked furiously, and the commandos prepared to fire out of pure panic. I grabbed Dmitri's wheelchair and instructed everyone to return to our gateway. But just before we were able to move, the alien being collapsed and fell forward. It kicked up a cloud of dust as it hit the ground. For a few minutes we stood in silence and watched its seamlessly dead body. My heart was racing, and I could feel my pulse in my temples. An echo of something larger falling to the ground in the distance reached us. The uneasy feeling from before turned into dread, mixed with the uncanny sensation of being watched. A sudden twisted spread through the dead body, and then, to our screams of terror, creatures began escaping through the holes in its skin and even through its many eye sockets. It's hard to describe the abhorrent sight that played out in front of us. These creatures resembled oversized black centipedes. One of them, the largest one, forced itself out through the mouth of the body, and it was at that repulsive moment that the commandos opened fire. The spacesuits made it more or less impossible to run, and it felt like running in a nightmare where you could never pick up speed, no matter how hard you tried. The arthropod beast swarmed towards us. One of the smallest ones crawled inside of the suit of one of the commandos. I could see it enter his mouth, and then eating its way out of one of his eyes. A bigger one crushed the visor of another commando and ripped his head off, with his spine still attached to it. I didn't run to save my life. not even to save the life of my friend, because I knew that the only nuclear radiation awaited us on the other side. I ran to save mankind from the same fate that had bestowed the inhabitants around KIC 846285, and to save myself and my friend from the jaws of the beasts. Even larger creatures, as big as trains, appeared from behind hidden spots inside the dark city. The dog ran in front of all of us and was the first to reach the gateway. Dimitri's wheelchairs fell over just as I was about to drag it up the stairs. Some of the creatures just ran past us, obviously more interested in getting through the gateway than killing us. I bent down and reached for Dimitri's hand. Sonia ran up to me and helped me put Dimitri back in his wheelchair. More and more creatures entered the gateway, and there was no indication that the warhead had been set off. "Why have they not detonated the nuke yet?" I asked. Since there was no way to open my visor and no time to take the helmet off, I just crushed the visor against the ground and yelled towards the sphere as loud as I could. "Blow it up, you cowards! Blow it up!" Sonia helped me drag Dimitri's wheelchair up the stairs.
Leave me here.
Dimitri begged.
I'm just...
"Shut up. I'm not going to leave you here to these abominations." 2 commandos ran past us, one going through the gateway, but just moments later his headless body was thrown back through it again. And then Sonia screamed and let go of the wheelchair. I almost dropped it. She put her hands up to her helmet in a desperate attempt to take it off, but there wasn't any time. The creatures ate its way through her eyes and continued to her brain, making her vomit uncontrollably until she fell down the stairs. It was a miracle that I got through the gateway together with Dimitri, but the chaos that met us, I can't even describe it. The women in the choir had been ripped apart, the guards were shooting at each other while naively trying to hit the creatures. The soldiers operating the missiles were nowhere to be seen, most likely because they had left their posts as soon as the first centipede appeared through the gateway. Except for 1 or 2 that were laying dead on the ground, the generals also were nowhere to be seen. But helicopters could be heard taking off outside, so it wasn't difficult to figure out where they were. The glass from my visor kept cutting my chest behind the suit as I zigzagged through the mayhem, pulling Dimitri in front of me. I could still hear him through the radio of his helmet.
Leave me next to the missile.
"What are you talking about?" I asked, although I already knew what he meant.
There's no reason for both of us to stay here. Alexander, save yourself.
"There's no way any of us are going to get out of here if we succeed."
Try. You can walk. I can't.
I stopped next to the missiles, not knowing what to say.
I'll give you some time, unless they get too close to me. No time for a sentimental goodbye, my friend. Just run,
Dimitri said. And I did. With tears of shame obstructing my vision, I did. I managed to get inside one of the helicopters that were just about to take off outside. A wife to one of the generals was sitting in it with her little boy, who must have been brought to the facility against protocol, just to let him watch history being made. He looked shell-shocked, but he was kept calm by the dog laying on the floor beneath his legs. "You saved her," I said, and tried to smile while the helicopter took off. The facility shrunk beneath us as we rose to the sky, and the further away we got, the more worried I became that one of the creatures had gotten to Dimitri. But then, maybe 1.5 kilometers away, the blinding light from the nuclear explosion overwhelmed us. I don't remember much after that. The shockwaves must have hit us pretty hard. I woke up in one of the rural locations. They told me that they had found the helicopter wreckage in one of the valleys behind the town. The boy and the dog had survived, but the mother and the pilot hadn't. The villagers had seen the mushroom cloud, but other than that, no one would have been able to see the explosion given its remote location. However, the increased radiation levels were detected over Scandinavia sometime later. Naturally, the government kept quiet about the reason, and I truly thought that everything would go back to normal, and that we was successful in averting the extinction of all life on Earth. But last week, I learned that Alonia had collapsed outside. Apparently one of her eyes were missing.